Stop me if you've heard this one before. I'm not bigoted against homosexual people. I'm just against homosexual people having more rights than heterosexual people. I'm not bigoted against trans people. I just don't want a full-grown man whipping his dick out in front of my preteen daughter. I'm not racist, but if we let black people and white people intermarry, what's next? Letting men marry animals? Letting men marry plants? Letting men marry people who identify as plants? Ah, that hurt my throat. Ah. The most straightforward, the most vital thing that we have to understand about this specific argument is that it suggests that different people require different kinds of rights, and that maybe some people should not have those specific rights. In modernity, this argument is generally applied to people on the LGBTQA spectrum, but historically it has been arbitrarily applied to people of different nationalities, people of different ethnicities, people of different social classes. Minor tangent, this is why the fracturing, the separating of different identities in right-wing discourse is so vital. The right cannot exactly propose the changes that they would make if people are unified. But if you can get people to attack one another, then you can just do what you want and they'll fight each other. I would hope that this is well known enough that I don't have to explain it. And yet here I am explaining it in a YouTube video for the second week in a row. I have lost control of my life. There are variants to this argument as well. Oftentimes, very commonly, a slippery slope argument is thrown in as well, as I demonstrated before in the Hunter Avallone impression, which I apologize for, and I apologize for making you suffer through. Occasionally, people who think that they're very smart will throw a libertarian bent into the conversation. Ben Shapiro, for example, is well known and has discussed in the past how he counters the argument about homosexuals deserving to have the same rights as heterosexual people by saying that a child has a right to a mother and a father. Similarly, assorted bigots will argue that because certain services, like social welfare and affirmative action, aren't available to everyone, then they are unjust and unfair and discriminatory and must be eliminated. This argument, like the last one, is not meant for you. This argument is meant for the people watching the debate, and it's meant to infer to them that people who have already been othered are being favored in some respect or capacity. Sometimes the argument is that they are being favored by the law. Sometimes the argument is that they are being favored by, let's say, nebulous forces. By making this argument, the fascist or fascist-adjacent person is flipping the script of oppression. They are telling the privileged person that because there are rights, because there are things that are not accessible to them, they are being oppressed. Furthermore, while it's not often said out loud, it can be inferred that the people doing this oppression are the people who are actually being oppressed. Notably, this argument can give privileged people a rationale to lash out at not privileged people, which is something that we've seen not just historically, but in modernity, in recent history. Or do you think it's a coincidence that everywhere Donald Trump walks, hate crimes are soon to follow? The effect of this argument, the goal of the argument, if such a thing can be said to exist, is to strip rights away from marginalized people. People who use this argument are literally saying that oppressed people have too many freedoms and some of them need to be taken away. And because we know that, because we can understand that, we can understand that people who make this argument are bigots. People who make this argument want marginalized people to have not just less rights than them, but less rights than they have right now. The best option for rebutting this talking point is to confront it directly. Don't dance around the issue, don't give your opponent the benefit of the doubt, confront them directly. Let everyone know exactly what they're saying and why they're saying it. Because, and I've brought this up before, people don't like bigots. And people, if they understand that someone is a bigot, will typically reject them. Additionally, it's worthwhile to present different people who do have different specific needs. Women, for example, have a much more pressing need for reproductive health care and natal health care. People who live in different parts of the world have different material needs based on where they live. A person who lives in the frigid north of Canada has different material needs, specifically housing, than someone who lives in Hawaii. People of different social classes face different oppressions that require different approaches to solve. And if all else fails, remind the audience of what happened the last time in recent memory when someone said that some people had too many rights. Just Godwin the thing. It's totally appropriate. Hey, editing Ron here. So I looked over the video again, and I came across some points that I think it was kind of bad that I omitted. So first off, I had several opportunities to mention the specific hardships that trans people face, and in what I can only describe as an egregious oversight, at no point did I do that. So I apologize for that, and trans rights. Trans rights are human rights, trans rights are civil rights, and everyone from Graham Leon to Phyllis Schlafly can go fuck themselves on a crucifix. The second point that I omitted, and this one is quite egregious too, is that the people who make this kind of argument are specifically and deliberately omitting the needs of people who are not them. I demonstrated that with the Hunter Avallone example, in that he's only talking about men marrying certain kinds of people, and people who are not men at that. But it has to be understood that the reason that that happens is because they are working to reaffirm their worldview. It's linked very specifically to the first point about proselytization that I made last week. The third thing that I omitted is that people who make this argument are not actually working to preserve the rights of anyone. They're just as willing to strip rights from themselves as they are other people, as long as it means that there is a net loss in total for the rights of the people whom are already marginalized. We see examples of this in states where, for example, people strip out the right to marriage entirely. There have been states that have tried to do that, quite hilariously. I think Texas did that. I'll see if I can find a link to that. That's not a specific point in and of itself, but it's a point that reinforces a broader point, that this is not about civil rights, that this is about oppression, that the people who make this kind of argument are specifically and deliberately seeking to oppress already marginalized people. The fourth and final thing that I omitted, and I can't believe I did this, is that at no point in the video did I mention trans people or the specific unique struggles that trans people face. So, trans rights are civil rights, trans rights are human rights, and Graham Leon can go fuck himself. I know that I already said that, but it really was an egregious oversight on my part, and I genuinely apologize. So, that's everything I wanted to cover. I'm all talked out, so to speak. Next week's topic is going to be something that I'm going to describe as performative normality. It's actually the first idea I came up with when coming up with all these different topics for this month. Yeah, so until we get there, take care of yourselves, alright?